come from a very different corner of the world. I'm not familiar with your industry very much. I've learned a lot in the last couple of days, but I come from a journalistic world, and what I'm going to try to do, without the help of a crystal ball, is to give you some outlook for the coming years, 2017, and to give you some signposts and signals and smoke signals to watch for, which could give you an idea about the disruptions that we may face in the next 12 months. Now, if you were in grammar school in the 5th grade and they called you a disruptor, it wasn't nice. They put it on your report card. But if you were in Silicon Valley and you had this new product and they called you a disruptor, you're on the way to being a millionaire or a billionaire. Disruptors are people or things or developments which change our lives forever. They come unexpectedly, and suddenly we're living in a very different world and in a very different situation. And the name has already been called. This is a disruptor. Among the things he's disrupted was my speech today. When I originally suggested a content for the coming year, I was going to explain about the new Clinton administration and what was going to happen to all the hate that had been generated in the election. And Donald Trump caught us by surprise in the primaries. And what used to be a Donald Trump problem is now an American problem because he's been elected. So if you have an issue with the policies of this man, you now have an issue with the voters of the United States of America. And a lot of things have changed and a lot more are going to change, and I'd like to run through some of those for you. But the first thing that happened to us was we got it all wrong. I mean, everybody got it wrong. Just not the smiling anchor people with their new white shiny teeth, but people down in the pits who were doing the research and the groundwork and the hard sociological studies. We were looking at all the swing states. We were looking at North Carolina. We were looking at Ohio. We were looking at Florida. We were looking at Pennsylvania. And we were going down into the counties and looking at the different ways that different voter groups would vote. We were all wrong. The polls were wrong. The politicians were wrong. Everybody got it wrong. There was an invisible voter in America, the Donald Trump voter. And in fact, some of the papers got it wrong too. Good morning, Mrs. President and Madam President on Newsweek. Now, this has happened before. This is nothing new. Papers have to be prepared for different things, and sometimes they had both title pages ready to go. In 1948, it happened in a very famous election with Dewey and Truman. Famous picture of Truman, a historical picture where he's said to lose the election, but he won. But the difference is, this is not 1948, where polling and politics were a guessing game. This is 2016. We live in the age of big data, where we know everything about everybody. If you look at the polling information that they had in Obama's election, they went into individual streets in Ohio, and they knew exactly when they were picking up people with their buses to take them to the polling places, they knew who to pick up because they knew who was going to vote for Obama. They combined in big data all the information about voter registration, all the information about government information on people was combined with the private industry and with these huge collections of information about what people were buying at Target, what people were looking at in the internet, whether people had debts or pets. All of that was put together to give people an exact idea of who's going to vote where. When the pollsters from Hillary Clinton went to the doors, they knew who was behind the door. They had very detailed information on that person. They knew what that person had said in phone calls. Because in addition to all of the polling and all of the preparation, Hillary Clinton had a huge army of people on the streets who were knocking on doors and meeting people. So no one thought the election could go wrong for her. In fact, in the initial public statements made by Trump's people, They said it would take a miracle for us to win. They said that on television, on the night of the election, as the votes were still being counted. Trump himself and his own people really didn't believe it could happen. Now, we're going to look at the world from very different perspectives. I've been listening to a lot of you at the various tables and networking events that we've had, learning something about your industry, but you're living in a very different world than a journalist does. We try to look at the world. This is our newsroom. This is the largest television network in Europe. It's called ARD-Tagesthemen. That's the news operation I ran for 13 years. And I always tell my people, when we're looking at news, to look for the news without the S. Because if we ran news that just confirmed all of your prejudices and confirmed the status quo the way it is, you wouldn't learn very much. What you need to learn is news without the S. What's new? What are the disruptors? What are the developments that are happening now that I may not have noticed, but are changing my life? Because those are the things that are important in news, not to confirm things that you know, but to change your life. A lot of the stuff that was said in the election, it was very scary. A lot of the stuff that was said about women, about all Mexicans being rapists, very relevant to this region of the world, the horrible things that were said in the election about people of Muslim faith. And one of our hopes has been that once he's get elected, there are two factors that are going to make these wild and hysterical and awful claims of the election campaign to be milder and more moderate. One of these things is the hate that we were dealing with. One of the reasons for hope was the new administration. Trump is not going to be alone in the White House. He's going to get some experienced people to come in. People who know government, people who know diplomacy, people who've traveled the world, people who know their fields of information, and that these people would moderate his opinions and help change them. And the other thing was checks and balances. The president isn't alone. He needs to get the laws through the Congress, he needs to get the budgets through the Congress, and the court system also has to prove that it's constitutional what he's doing. So he's living in a controlled system. Well, let's take a look at some of the people first. This was the first man that Donald Trump appointed to his new government. His name is General Michael Flynn. He was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the military version of the CIA, an experienced man who calls Islamists a vicious cancer, who's made very, very awful statements about the religion of Islam. This man was chosen for the job of Attorney General. Now, in the history of my country, Attorney Generals are the people, the guardians of civil rights. Bobby Kennedy, for example, he was the Attorney General of John Kennedy, and he was the one who brought the federal government into the states where racism was very rampant, in Mississippi and Alabama, and the National Guard. He protected the civil rights. But the man chosen by Donald Trump to protect civil rights, Jeff Sessions, is a man who was turned down, rejected as a federal judge because of racist things that he had said. These are the first two choices we've got. So the hope that these people are going to moderate are not very good. Well, we still have the system of checks and balances. We have the executive in the White House. We have the legislative in the Congress. And the judicial, maybe they will give us some more balance. The trouble is, Trump not only swept the Electoral College votes, he also swept the Congress, both houses, the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives are both in solid Republican hands. Politically, this means his budgets, the laws that he needs, the things he wants to do, will probably be rubber stamped by Congress. And then there's the judicial office. They're going to check and see if that's constitutional that he's doing now. The Supreme Court. At the moment, the Supreme Court is divided. 4 liberals, 4 conservatives. But there's a seat free. And Obama was not able to fill this seat due to Republican influences in the conference. But Trump will fill that, and he will have a 5-4 majority. And other additional seats that may become free in the Supreme Court will also be controlled by Trump. So in terms of the separation of powers and checks and balances, there is not much that's going to slow him down or make his views more moderate. Now, a government in transition normally says certain things in public to the world to build your confidence. They will tell you their new government, and this is also true of a military putsch. It's also true of any kind of change of government. They will try to convince the world that they're going to be transparent, that they're going to be stable, and that they're going to offer continuity, so you don't scare the businesses away. Trump has 3 other principles which he thinks are very important. Secrecy. He has criticized again and again the Obama administration for announcing when troops were going to be withdrawn. He thinks the superpower should surprise people, and it should be very, very secret about its intentions, and it should move very, very quickly. So here are some of the signposts of the things we have to sort of look for. A couple of different subjects. In oil markets, we know Trump wants to open up United States production of oil, of shale, of new pipelines to Alaska. So we will have the United States consuming less oil, demand for oil worldwide being reduced somewhat by that. Global warming is something he does not believe in. Far East manufacturing is something he's very critical of, unless he's building a building, then he likes Chinese steel very much. Far East tourism may well be affected by everything. And unfortunately, anti-Muslim prejudice and anti-Muslim politics are a part of the United States policy of this new administration. That is so horrible for a nation that was built on immigration, for a nation that has freedom of religion as one of its founding factors. The pilgrims who came to America were running away from places where they had no religious freedom. This is a very modest photograph of a very horrible event. This is a pilot of the Air Force in Jordan. Now, the Jordan Air Force, on the attacks on ISIS, they were fighting wingtip on wingtip. They're flying their sorties into ISIS territory, risky sorties. They were allies and friends of the United States. And this man got shot down in ISIS territory. He got taken prisoner in ISIS territory, and they put him in an iron-barred cage like a zoo animal. They doused him with gasoline. They set him on fire and killed him. And they filmed a horrific video of his death. This is one of the signs of the ISIS barbarism. But I would like you to think and imagine for a moment that you're part of his family, or that you're a fellow pilot in the Jordanian Air Force, or that you're just a Jordanian citizen and you want to travel to the United States, and the gatekeepers of this great nation say, your visits to this country are restricted because of the way you pray. That is unacceptable. That is so horrible. America needs friends in the world. We are now here in a country that is one of America's friends in the world, that has pilots who go in and risk their lives in the fight for ISIS, including a lady pilot from the UAE. We need the Qataris and the Saudis and everyone who's staying with us. But Let's step away from all this Trump stuff for a minute. And let's look at, well, some of the developments that are happening now, and especially in the fight with ISIS. This is a very interesting graphic showing the ISIS-controlled territories from the beginning of October till today. That's a very short time slot, and you can see the great amounts of territory taken away. I've been in Iraq and Kuwait during the war. I know several of the commanders on the ground from the Peshmerga. I know several of the Al Jazeera correspondents who work under very dangerous conditions in this area. I have a lot of information. And there's a lot of reason for us to be optimistic about the fight against ISIS. People I talk to think by the end of this year, within a month, that Mosul will probably fall. And by springtime of next year, there is good reason to hope that Raqqa in Syria will fall. The whole concept of ISIS is based on the caliphate. It is based on owning territory, on having a physical, geographical homeland. You take that away, the caliphate, and if they're lucky, they may get the head of ISIS. That will really weaken them. And it will leave behind a vacuum in the year 2017. I left the names off these two countries, but I'm sure you all know that this over here is Iraq and that up there is Syria. I left the names off because these countries don't exist anymore. There is no Iraq anymore, except maybe in your newspaper or on your TV maps. Iraq is a divided nation, and they're divided up into Shia, they're divided up into Sunni, they're divided up into many, many clans. In the northern parts of Iraq, there's basically an independent nation, owned and operated by the Kurds, who have a more or less democratic system there. It's divided up in ways that will never be put together again, if you ask me. I think the concept of the country Iraq is gone. In fact, on a weekend, just this weekend, the government in Baghdad decided to officially recognize the Shia troops, the Shia foreign troops, we're talking about Revolutionary Guards coming in from Iran, as legitimate forces within their own country. And Syria, well, Syria is even much more divided than Iraq is. If you look at a realistic map of Syria, it looks like a leopard skin. You see, these lines that make up the borders, they're straight lines drawn in the sand by colonial powers a long time ago, without any particular interest in the local tribes, the local religions, the local cultures. They just put up these lines, and these countries were held stable, like Yugoslavia, like the Soviet Union, by tyrannical governments. And those governments, when they failed, left a vacuum behind. This is what Syria looks like in reality, the different groups that are controlling it. You have al-Nusra and many of the rebel groups. You have, of course, the government. The Syrian coast is extremely interesting for the Russians. If you ever look at a map of Russia, you know Vladivostok up in the east is locked in ice in the wintertime. And the Balkan states, where they have their submarines, they have to go by all kinds of NATO countries to get out. The Bosporus is all closed down for them. They have very little access to the world for their navies. So they really need to have harbors and air stations. This is a critical strategic area of interest for Vladimir Putin. In fact, the Iranians also said they'd like to have a harbor there too for their military. Very recently, day before yesterday, they started raising their claims. There are these conferences, they call them peace conferences. Everybody's there, and everyone's trying to divide up the cake that was at one time the nation of Syria. And it's all splittered up into all kinds of different groups. So if we look in the future for 2017, We have to stop looking in the rear-view mirror, looking back to the Iraq and Syria that we once knew, in the hope that we can somehow set up an interim government, and then it will gradually retake the country. Not going to happen. We need a new vision, and I'll give you one of several. Not necessarily mine, but one thing you might want to watch for in the coming years. It's possible that in this region, a new nation will be born. A nation that never existed, a nation that does not have Arabic as its main language, a nation that has a natural alliance with the West, a nation that may someday soon at the United Nations be raising its flag. I'm talking about Kurdistan. The northern part of Iraq is already basically an independent Kurdistan. And if you look at the way the fronts are moving, and most of the fighting, the dying, the bleeding, the killing, the winners on the land are the Peshmerga, the Kurdish troops. So you may see in the coming years the first baby steps of a nation that will be formed in this region. 20% of Turkish territory, 20% of the Turkish population, they're Kurds. There's a huge Iranian population of Kurds. So that may be one of the developments you want to look for in the coming years. And it will be interesting to see how the macho friendship between Trump and Vladimir Putin develops. We can expect there to be a relaxation of tension between these two countries. This may be very important for you because we may expect large numbers of Russian tourists to flock to this area and others around the world because the sanctions will probably be released or softened up. We don't know exactly where that will go, but it will probably mean less tension. There will be more tension with Iran. We know that's going to happen. And you may have read in the newspapers, a lot of NATO people are saying, oh, the Russian fleet has just passed through the British Channel and it's going down to the Middle East. With the aircraft carrier, you've read about that, right? A lot of people pretend that's very dangerous. This looks like a burning oil platform, right? This is not a burning oil platform. This is their aircraft carrier. This is the only Russian aircraft carrier. It's not powered like the Americans were by atomic energy. It's powered by diesel. And these are the fumes that come out of that thing. It's called a Kuznetsov. And when it travels, it always has a towing ship with it because it often breaks down and needs to be sort of helped along. You have to be careful when you read things in the newspaper. It's not always necessarily true. So we will have to see how the Russian bear and Uncle Sam get along. But we can expect a releasing of tension there. I think that's one of the things that we should really look for. Now, the ultimate disruptors, the uncontrollable, unpredictable disruptors are terror, nuclear explosions, North Korea, Iran, maybe some dirty bomb somewhere. That would turn the whole world upside down. Or technology. We all know, looking back, how unpredictable it was and how fast it changes. I've spent the last 2.5 years of my journalistic life investigating artificial intelligence. And I can promise you, this is going to be a major subject in the coming year because the potential of artificial intelligence is so enormous. We all know about facial recognition. When you travel to this country, when you get to immigration, you have to put your fingerprint. They take your picture. You think they're going to identify you here? Wrong. They've identified you here in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi at the airport long before you get to immigration because your picture has been taken by several cameras. They have an excellent police force here. They even were able to take apart a Mossad attack that happened here in Dubai and examine and photograph all of the agents who were involved in it. They're very, 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 very good and very, very watchful. And facial recognition is not just like we think, all from the front, because most of the cameras of the intelligence services or the police are above us, looking down. So there are experts in facial recognition that will look at the way your ears are, whether you've got your head forward when you walk, and do a vertical recognition, and they can look at thousands of people at the same time. The police here are also using Google Glass. They're very, very technologically advanced, as opposed to me. Here we go. That always happens. I hate these things. But artificial intelligence is different from a single camera watching a single person. Artificial intelligence can watch and analyze in real time thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And just as we, with our limited human intelligence, can analyze what a single person is doing and where he's going, I hope you could understand me during the music there. Artificial intelligence can understand and analyze what all of these people are doing. Oh, there you are. Hi. That's nice when I can get to see you, too. Cyber war is a part of artificial intelligence. We may have experienced it in the elections. People are not really sure. It's invisible, you see, cyber war is. And it's terrifying. If they turn off all of your power plants, if they shut down all of your smartphones, we're really in trouble. Cyber capabilities are very strong in the world. They are being developed with artificial intelligence right now. And the man who just stepped down as the head of U.S. intelligence, James Clapper, said, "This is the biggest threat to our security, not ISIS." Artificial intelligence is getting better every day and smarter. They say it will soon be 1,000 times smarter than all of humanity. 1,000 times smarter than all humanity. And I just wrote a book about it, and you try to figure out how are you going to understand something that's 1,000 times smarter than. And the answer, one that will surpass us, it has already in many areas. Many areas of our society are being controlled by artificial intelligence. Today, our stock markets, for example. And they're involved in weaponry. Now, in my research, I visited a secret killer drone place from the U.S. Air Force and researched that for a while. If you could watch the volume, please, on the next video so I can still talk to everyone. So, can you hear me, I hope? In spite of the music? Okay. These are films of Predator and Reaper drones. I'm sure you've all seen these kind of aircraft. There are U.S. pilots in the U.S. state of New Mexico. They get up in the morning, they have breakfast at Pancake House. They go to work, kill Taliban all day. They come back home and help their children with their homework. Modern warfare. This is what it's all about. These are very, very effective weapon systems. Very, very effective. But there are a lot of problems with them, like legal problems and ethical problems in dealing with them. So you can have whatever opinion you wish to have about the use of drones, but I ask you, do not think that this is modern weaponry, because these drones are 20 years old. It's old technology. It's yesteryear. This is what a new drone looks like. These are the thinking drones. This is a Pegasus. It's an X-47B. It's a modern drone. Instead of the Predators with their propellers and stuff, this thing flies with a jet engine. It flies 2,000 miles into enemy territory, drops its bombs, and flies 2,000 miles back at near supersonic speeds. And it carries a lot of bombs. And it lands on aircraft carriers. And ask a pilot. I spent the second Gulf War on an aircraft carrier. I understand a little bit about them. It's the most difficult landing for a pilot. And these machines do it wonderfully. And there are two things about this drone that are significant. Number one, it's invisible. Now, we've all heard about stealth and making airplanes invisible for radar. No, this is invisible for your eye. It flies overhead, and you cannot see it because it has on the bottom LED plastic sheets, and on the top, cameras that are filming the sky above it. So it is always projecting the sky onto the bottom of the airplane, and you can't see it, or maybe you'll see a little bit of something out of focus. The second thing is, it has the intelligence to make the kill decision. By US law, the kill decision now always has to have a human being in the loop before a drone is allowed to kill anyone. This is still true. The law is unchanged, but this drone can make that decision just as well, just as intelligently as a human being can with the help of artificial intelligence. This is just a little tiny look into one of the big disruptors of the coming year. Intelligent drones. I want to give you a little positive note at the end. If you're worried about drones filming you from the sky with their infrared sensors, this is a guy from where I come from Brooklyn, New York. Adam Harvey, he's developed these foil fashions so the drones can't see you. Okay? Very, very good. And they also have, so that they don't, facial recognition. You know, you don't want to be, but good luck getting through immigration with that on. It probably won't work. But so it's probably more of a fashion statement than it is, you know. Anyway, my last remark is 1,450 days until the next US presidential election. Thank you very much.